I think there's something really profound, something really meaningful when it comes to looking at photo books, from other photographers. And throughout the last years and months, I came across a bunch of very impactful photo books, impactful in a sense of how they influenced my work, my way of seeing, and my vision of photography in terms of what photography can do, which is for me more than just taking photographs. It's really creating and forming photographs, working on composition, on light and color. There is so many aspects in photography that are, at least I feel, often overlooked, especially if you just look at photography, which is kind of only happening on Instagram. I've talked a lot about this very topic in my last video, so if you haven't checked it out, I'm talking about inspiration and how Instagram fails in providing us with real photographic inspiration. And if you've seen my latest video, you already know like how important I find it to get inspiration from like a more deep and profound source, which in my opinion is 100% based in photo books. So in this video, I want to share some of my favorite color photography books. The photo books I've picked for this video are more focused on street photography, because I think especially color street photography is something that, like, in the very beginning of photography wasn't really, well known and not really appreciated. It took some time for color street photography to become popular. First, street photography was just mainly black and white focused. So I really found it very interesting to get some inspiration from like color street photographers. A lot of them actually shot fashion campaigns as well, and I will dive a little deeper into that as well. But just by looking at those photo books and seeing their impactful work like from over the years and decades, it's just so, it really touches my taste and my heart in like how I want to evolve as a photographer. And the photographers that I want to share with you are not like unknown in any sense. They're really kind of, well-known photographers from Magnum, from different like agencies. And the reason why I'm sharing these photo books with you is that I want to emphasize how meaningful the work of those photographers, even if it's from the 1950s, how impactful this work can be for a photographer in 2023, even looking at those old images. If you don't know any of the following photographers, I would highly recommend to have a look, search on the internet, or just get your hands on one of these books. Because if you haven't experienced looking at a photo book and seeing such an impactful work from back in the days, it changed like my whole being as a photographer, like in thinking about what kind of photographer I want to become, how I want my work to be seen, and how I want to evolve as a image maker. So without making this too long, let's dive right into the photo books. The first book I want to share with you is from Alex Webb, a huge book, which is called The Suffering of Light. So Alex Webb is pretty much one of the most iconic color street photographers of our time. He became a Magnum photographer member in 1979. His work has been exhibited worldwide, not to mention in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. He was also awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2007, and Alex's work is just mind-blowing. As I mentioned before, street and documentary photography was mostly shot in black and white back in the days. So Alex was one of the first pioneers in terms of taking color photographs. He also started shooting black and white, but then came across the power of color photography, especially when he was shooting in the Caribbean and in Mexico. He's very well known for his color contrasts, his use of light, and his complex compositions. He says that color is about emotion. And as I said before, this book includes 30 years of Alex's work, and I just find it mind-blowing to see those images from all across the world, and I can find so much inspiration in how he sees the world and how he's able to capture such iconic images. And just by looking at those images, you can really see how Alex is able to include tiny details, putting different layers into the image, and it's just amazing how Alex is able to put so many different details and color contrasts into one photo. So highly recommended The Suffering of Light from Alex Webb. Probably one of my favorite books to look at. Next up, a much smaller book. And it's not a photo book necessarily because of its format. It's more like a book that you can easily just bring wherever you go. But I really found it very nice just for having it in this kind of size, just to, put it in my backpack and have it with me whenever I want to. It's about Saul Leiter, all about Saul Leiter from Thames and Hudson. And it features some of the images from Saul Leiter. There's something very interesting about Saul Leiter because at first he didn't want to become a photographer, but he wanted to become a painter. So this is what he wanted to do. Eventually he found that he's not so talented in painting, but rather in taking photographs. And he was handed his first camera to experiment with 35mm film. And he really fell in love with taking photographs. But you will see that the way that he's taking photos is so much influenced by his desire to paint, actually. So what he does in his photographs is he's using a lot of reflection, windows, lights, and just building such unique perspectives, especially in street photography, that was unseen. His work was very well known in the 50s and 60s and was kind of rediscovered in the 1980s. But the way that he's able to capture street photography and also fashion photography, he also shot for Harper's Bazaar and British Vogue. His way of taking photographs is just so impactful, and it really had a huge influence on my personal approach on taking photographs of people, especially portraiture, but also street photography. Doesn't need to be color. His work is mainly focused on color. He also shot black and white at first, but just the way he's composing images and how he's framing his subjects is just so incredible. And one of my favorite photographers of all time, for sure, Saul Leiter. When you look at his photographs, it's really like looking at a painting. It's like you don't know how this is actually a photo. You can't probably tell if it was shot on camera or if it was painted. What I also love about this book is that there are some quotes from him, and some of them are quite interesting. A window covered with raindrops interests me more than a photograph of a famous person. If you want to dive deeper into the work of Saul, there is also some very nice bigger photo books that you can get. I haven't had the chance to get my hands on one of them. And as I said, he was also very well known in the fashion photography, so you can look up some of his fashion photography work. Very interesting to see. So next up, a photo book from Harry Gruayert, Belgian photographer. Also very well known for his color photography, even though he was criticized for shooting color. As I said, black and white photography was that kind of style, that kind of photos that were famous and well known in the documentary and in the street photography world. So together with Alex Webb, he was one of the most influential pioneers in color street photography, and he's considered one of the most important European photographers of all time. This book, also published by Thames and Hudson, I think it doesn't have any title to it, but just by seeing at the cover photo kind of gives you a feeling of what kind of images are in this book. And there's a quote I found on his biography, actually, which I want to share with you. Whether Gruyaert roams the streets of Antwerp, Las Vegas, Moscow or Paris, it is not the need to document that drives him, but his appetite for interpretation. He directs us toward the unsung joy and tragedies of realities that upon first observation seem barren and empty, but in fact are structured through color planes and details. I think this pretty much sums up what this photo book is about. So when Harry started to travel across Morocco and different countries, his work really started to shine in the way he's able to document life and the way that he's using color in his photographs. You see, his work kind of goes in the same direction as the work of Alex Webb. Still very different, I would say. His use of like graphic elements and using lines and shapes is absolutely unique. What I found very interesting about his work is that he's actually not using people as people in the photographs. Sometimes they're just more sort of a graphic element, or even just they don't look human at all. It's just they are part of the image, they play a role in the image for sure, but they're not like the central part of the image. So looking at his work, I think he shot mostly on 35 or 28 millimeter lenses, as well as Alex Webb. Compared to the work of Saul Leiter, I think he shot mostly on a 50 or even closer. There's also a documentary about Harry Gruayert, which I highly recommend you watching. I will link it down in the description. Very nice documentary about his life and his work. The last photo book I want to share with you today is from the American-French photographer Christopher Anderson. You might have seen me sharing some of his work on Instagram, and I have to admit that I'm a huge fan because it is so diverse in the terms of the subject that he shoots. The early works of Christopher Anderson are actually from Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, and Israel. So he was more a documentary photographer before he started to document his life, I would say, and before he was more into portrait photography. And the photo series that brought him the most attention was when he was boarding a boat in 1999 with Haitian refugees sailing to America. Eventually the boat sunk in the Caribbean, and Anderson took some incredible images from that experience. If you look at his work, it is more like he has changed his style of photography from documenting wars and the life of refugees to documenting the life of his family and taking portraits of well-known people. It looks like he became another photographer, but to him it is all kind of connected. So actually, when he was documenting the life of his son Atlas in the book Son, in his very first photo book, he was dealing with the death of his father, who got sick, and all this documentary photography he used to do before was kind of a preparation for taking photographs of his family. So for him it's all connected to emotion, and I think you really see that in his photographs. And one thing that he also said is that it's gotta be more than beauty, something that really stuck with me when I first heard him saying in one of his interviews. So what I love about the photo book Pia is not only the colors, but also the compositions and the scenes that he's sharing from his family life, from vacations, from just being somewhere between New York and Paris. I especially love his use of color and his way of framing and working on compositions in his photographs. Also the use of light and how he kind of creates tension in the photographs by using light and shadow for taking portraits of people is just really inspiring to see. If you kind of want to start getting into photo books, this is for sure one of the books that I would recommend, because it has some documentary photography, it has some portrait photography, it is beautiful images. The book and the pages in itself is just so lovely to look at and really, really nice, and sparks some really creative things inside me when I look at those photos. So I would highly recommend picking one of these up. They're super beautiful to look at. They feel very, very nice, and it's just a nice thing to have in your home. So that wraps up the video, guys. Thank you very much for being here with me today. I hope you got some value out of this video. Thank you for spending the time. I always try to make these videos as personal and as informative as possible for you, so that you don't regret spending the time with me. I hope you got some value out of this video. I'm excited to share some more of my favorite photo books and photo zines in the future. Not necessarily from Magnum photographers again, but like from more, you know, like not as well-known photographers, but their work has also been very influential on me as a image maker, and also sparked some kind of, you know, joy in me to create my own first zine or photo book or whatever it's gonna be. Maybe I will start working on that in the future. We'll see. If you have any photo book recommendations or favorite photographers from yourself that you want to share with me, please put it down in the comments. I'm always looking for new photographers to get my hands on their work, and I know there's so much great photo books out there. So please, if you have any recommendations, please feel free to share them in the comments with me. Thanks again for watching the video, and see you in the next one.